Danny, thanks so much for having this kind of doing this interview, and I'm really excited about kind of things that are developing with Rawl. So I greatly appreciate the opportunity to talk to you. First of all, what got you interested in hi-fi music and gear and all that kind of thing?
Oh, back when I was a kid, first of all, I'm a fourth generation musician, and I was very turned on to music, and uh, probably in about 1964, I was about 6 years old, got very turned on, and I had a record player, and it was had a tube amplifier, and it was pretty cheap and needed to work every once in a while. And as a 10-year-old, I just started messing around with it and became fascinated by it. And by 1977, being a musician, I built my first recording studio. And over the next 20, I think it was 20 years roughly, I built three recording studios and was
Oh wow.
doing a lot of that type work and being a musician. And the whole hi-fi thing was just a real natural kind of part of all of that. And I got less involved with recording and just more involved with the hi-fi side, the reproduction side of things.
Right. Okay. Great. And you said you're a musician. Do you play? I believe is it double bass or what do you play?
Yeah, I played double bass, cello, and electric bass.
Oh wow, that's awesome. Okay, so obviously Rawls very famous for their ribbon transducers, and I like to kind of focus on that in the technology side of things as well. So, what about the ribbon technology, especially what Rawl makes? What about that do you prefer over other transducer technologies? So things like dynamics, electrostats, planars, both in the case of headphones and speakers. Why do you like ribbon? Hello, hello, hello.
Hi, it cut out for a while.
Oh,
You
sorry.
were asking about ribbons, and you said something about dynamics and planar magnetics.
Yeah, yeah. Basically,
Yeah.
like, why, and electrostats and those kinds of things. Why do you like? Why do you tend to gravitate towards ribbon, and why do you like the ribbon sound?
Oh, I see. Well, a ribbon, when you think about it, it's it's really it's the voice coil and the diaphragm all in one piece.
Right.
With a planar magnetic, you start out with some sort of most likely like a mylar type substrate, and then you have to use glue to um, glue on the traces that create the actual. You might call it a voice coil,
Right.
like you would in a dynamic speaker. And so you have that, and then they're also attached on all four sides, or
Right.
all the way around. Let's put it the entire thing around. And if you look at say a dynamic driver, you've got a voice coil, a spider, a cone, a dust cap, a surround. Uh, there's all these pieces involved that have to be put together. And with a ribbon, it's the most elegant uh, transducer you can possibly imagine. It's a
Mm-hmm.
piece of aluminum foil in a magnetic field. It's diaphragm and voice coil all at the same time. And on average, a ribbon compared to a planar or a dynamic is probably, oh, I don't know, a tenth to a 20th the moving mass. It's extremely light,
Wow.
so transient response is incredible. You don't have all those glue joints gluing together dissimilar materials. You don't have drum modes, which are difficult to tame, and part of the problems of why planars and dynamics and electrostats can only get so good.
Hmm.
Think of the ribbon like you would a guitar string.
Right.
It's suspended by 2 points, and you can set its free air resonance anywhere you want. You're going to
Hmm.
have excursion limits like you would any other driver,
Yeah.
but you're able to actually tune the ribbon to get the free air resonance.
Hmm.
So
Okay.
it's just kind of like on in the sense of like, you know, if if it's recognized that simplicity, and of course you can have too much simplicity. There's no question about it.
Hmm.
But when you think of a ribbon, it's like it's at the point of irreducible complexity. You can't get it any simpler and have a functioning item where all the others require so much more. And having drum modes really limits how good they can sound. There is a property there that kind of boxes you in. A ribbon is even more flexible. It has its limits too, especially in the when you're talking about excursion and power handling, that sort of thing. Luckily, though, with a headphone, because of its proximity to your ears, the ribbon can operate in a full range spectrum and still play sufficiently loud, you know, to enjoy music.
Right.
So it's an ideal
So
driver. Ideal.
so with respect to speakers, I mean, Rawl is very famous for their ribbon tweeters, and
Yeah,
I guess you harness all those advantages to make something that's very resolving and fast sounding and detailed. But then now transitioning to the headphone world, now what you're doing is you're doing a full range ribbon rather
sure.
than just upper frequency. So what was that transition like for you, and what made you decide to go into the headphone world? Because I understand before you were more of a speaker guy.
Oh, right. Well, you know, actually, there are two companies involved. One is Rawl, and the other is a company called Requisite.
Hmm.
You might have noticed on our product it says Rawl Requisite.
Yes.
And Alex owns Rawl, and I own Requisite. And Alex really took the lead in coming up with this whole design and, you know, responsibility for actually bringing it to life.
Okay.
Um, my my company has been manufacturing studio products like compressors, mic preamplifiers, uh, tube amplifiers, high-end cabling, that sort of thing, microphones. But I was a client with Alex back in, I don't know, I think it was, I don't know, it was early 2000. I think it was maybe
Hmm.
2000, 2002, something in that range. And I used to use his ribbons. And we became very good friends uh, as a result of that relationship. And so we started doing a couple of projects together. We built a omnidirectional speaker that had 76 drivers in it,
Wow.
very complicated, and that included, I believe it was 30 ribbon drivers. I think there was 15 ribbons per side.
Right. Wow.
Uh, yeah, it was quite a project. But what we found about it is that speakers were big and heavy. They were quite expensive. If you wanted to demonstrate them, or if a shop wanted to try them, the shipping cost was extremely high. The setup is difficult. You're kind of, to a certain degree, captive to the environments that you find yourself showing these things in. There were all these variables and all these difficulties, and we just realized that the speaker business for us, because we were running a ribbon manufacturing company and a studio company, so we just had too much going on, and the effort it would take to put towards a loudspeaker venture was just enormous.
Right.
But uh, I happened to notice that the headphone community was really alive and very vital. It reminded me of the two-channel world back in the 70s and 80s where like stuff was really happening and going on.
Mm-hmm.
And so I called Alex one day and I says, man, and a friend of mine, the wood shop we used, I hooked him up with a company called Odyssey, and he was making all their wood rings.
Right.
And he was telling me how busy he was with all these rings. And I realized, that sounds like a very vital, part of the audio world. It just seems like, you know, stuff is really going on there, and it fascinated me. And also the thought of working with headphones, they're small and light. We didn't have these big flight cases to move speakers around and all of that stuff and setup. It was just like very appealing. And I'm getting kind of old. I'm 64 years old. And so I don't move big cabinets around as well as I used to in my 20s and 30s.
Right.
So I called Alex and I said, this whole headphone world is amazing. Headphones are getting better and better. They're becoming quite sophisticated. They're getting a lot of respect. It was just like, wow, this is dynamic. Things are going on here. So I was telling Alex all that, and he says, well, he says, I've been thinking about actually doing a headphone that uses a ribbon a ribbon diaphragm, not a ribbon tweeter. And so we talked about it more, and it took about, I think, 10 years total.
Mm-hmm.
Alex had already been kind of playing with it for 2 years. And then after I got involved, it took another 8 years. But it was a long path. There were all kinds of obstacles to take care of because the ribbon does really have excursion limits and things like that. So a lot of new development had to happen. So it took us a long time, and we had a lot of interruptions along the way, like just running our respective companies and families and children being born, all kinds of things. So it was kind of an elongated incubation and development period. But finally, one day, Alex called me. We were having some trouble with some suspension issues and some foam that would have special characteristics. And so one day, Alex called me and he says, well, I think they're finished. I think they're done. And I said, what? He says, the headphones. I said, no, you're kidding me. And so he flew out from Serbia to California, and he gave them to me to listen to. And because we wanted to do the Rocky Mountain show, and we wanted to make sure we had some. So he brings them out, and I'm listening to them, and I'm kind of, like, as soon as I put them on, I thought, oh my goodness, these are wonderful. And I kind of pretended that I didn't like them. I was just really quiet, and I didn't smile. I didn't give them any indication of my opinion. For about, I don't know how long I kept that up, maybe 15, 20 minutes. And poor Alex, he was just sweating. And finally, I couldn't help it anymore. And I had a big smile on my face. And I says, Alex, these are really the best headphones I've ever heard. They were just, they blew my mind. They were really good.
That's awesome.
So, yeah, we had a laugh about it. And then we went to work a little bit more collaborative because there were certain things to refine. It was like the very first articles. And so we went through and cleaned up a few things. And, that they became the product that they are.
So the design is obviously, pretty much totally different than almost anything on the market thus far. It is a winged, open, totally open design. What do
Yeah.
you like about that design as opposed to kind of traditional circumaural designs?
Well, actually, that aspect of the design was very critical to Alex and I. We both agreed from the very beginning that they would be an open baffle type design, and the reason for that is typically with a most headphones you're likely to encounter the speaker that's inside the headphone has a free air resonance of anywhere from, I don't know, maybe 100 cycles up as high as 500. I've even heard some of them are as high as 1,000 cycles.
Mm-hmm.
That's their free air resonance. That's their bass performance. And the way you get bass performance out of what is essentially a mid-range driver is you create cabin effect, which is
Right.
sealing up the driver and your ears together. Uh, and what happens there is it creates bass due to the volume of air that it's playing into.
Right.
And that bass is a it's an acoustic phenomena. It's not something the driver is actually capable of, but it requires that environment. And we both felt that in the case of headphones, that's about the only time in listening to anything and in life and hearing sounds in general that you actually do it inside of that environment. All the
Right.
rest of the life, you're hearing sound in the open air.
Yes.
That's how we hear. And again, like with the using a ribbon, because it was the most elegant, most simple design you could have with the least amount of parts. And it has its own problems, but they're not the same usual problems that everybody's been fighting with for a long time. And mastering, I mean, a lot of people do a great job at it. Don't get me wrong. There's wonderful things about it. I'm just only speaking to the uniqueness of the ribbon technology. The other stuff is perfectly good, so there's no problem with it. But in our opinion, we really wanted to have something where you could listen to it naturally, like a set of speakers. They just happen to be hanging very, very close to your ears. And the driver being a ribbon driver being so incredibly accurate, it's just a piece of
Right.
foil moves within this homogeneous magnetic field. All it can do is do what it's told to do.
Right.
There's really not a lot of errors there. So here you have this beautiful full range driver hanging, a quarter to 3/8 of an inch away from your ear. And so what you've got, that's why we call them ear field monitors, is essentially you have like a near field monitor without all the comb filtering and without all the room effects and reflections. You just get right to the driver and what's in the recording. So by not having the ear pads, you get a fully natural bass. It's not the same bass that you would typically experience in a headphone. Headphones have that kind of big, cushy, very, there's a lot of presence to the bass wearing a headphone. It becomes a different presentation really altogether because of the sealed environment. So we wanted people to experience bass more closely to what is actually on the recording and in balance all the way through the spectrum it's like a speaker, but without the room interferences and without crossover networks and all the crazy things that go with trying to make a 2, 3, 4-way system. we just wanted to boil it down to the most elegant design we possibly could, that would allow for the most natural presentation. So that was a big goal of ours. Now, once we accomplished that, we set out, and it was from the very beginning that we intended to make a circumaural.
Right.
We weren't avoiding that, because there really is a lot of legitimacy to that experience, and we felt that a circumaural experience with a ribbon driver would be very appealing to a lot of people that have headphones with the other types of technologies for transducers. But this would offer a whole new thing. So in September at CanJam, we'll be showing our circumaural version of a ribbon headphone.
So yeah, that's kind of one of my main motivations to kind of have this conversation, is this exciting announcement about the circumaural version of your headphone technology. So if you could elaborate on that, um, I guess the obvious thing is the difference in the bass presentation, as you said. So how will that differ from your current SR1A? I'm assuming kind of more bass. How will like a bass extension be affected? What about like impact, detail, that kind of thing? Like what's the difference between the two in that regard?
Yeah. Well, it would be, since the ribbon is able to play down to 30 cycles, and in reality, we can tune the ribbon. It's think of a guitar string. We can loosen the ribbons down to one cycle.
Right.
It's not like a driver where you're stuck with, a conventional driver that is affixed on all of its outside edges. You're really limited to what kind of free air resonance you can get off of, say, a 2-inch driver. It's not going to do it. But a ribbon, by its nature, you can tune it all the way down to DC, actually. Of course, it would blow immediately, but you can get it down very, very low. It's just that the lower you go, the softer the volume is going to be, which is, of
Right.
course, natural. You've got that roll off. And by increasing its excursion, you can play lower and lower, but it's going to be the whole headphone itself is going to not play as loud. It's not going to be able to do it. So inherently, 30 cycles seems to be real good for what we're doing right now as a free air resonance. So when you put the circumaural pads, you have extension naturally down to 30. And so when you start talking about even lower frequencies, because of cabin effect and how it works, it's going to have a bass that plays very, very low. I don't have numbers on it yet to actually tell you specifically, but it plays very, very low naturally. But with the assist of the circumaural pads, it's going to give you a very plentiful bass. And because it's a ribbon, you still have that beautiful and natural smooth extension from the bass all the way through the audio bandwidth. You'll still get that really fast. I mean, our impulse response is ridiculously fast because you're pushing something that weighs just a little bit more than the air around it. It's fast.
Right.
And so what we expect is like the best of both worlds, but it'll be appealing to people who like the circumaural experience, which is perfectly valid. I happen to like the open baffle quite a lot, like I say, because that's the natural way we listen anyway. But there's a whole world of headphones using circumaural, and we'd like to be a part of it.
Yeah, that makes total sense. So again, going back to the bass for a second. So a lot more bass should be expected. The extension, would the extension be kind of similar, like around 30 hertz? Is that the case?
Well, what'll happen is because of cabin effect, at 30, where the say the SR1 rolls off, and where and the SR1 is limited to its free air resonance, where a
Right.
headphone gets assist from free air down. So with this, what'll happen is, yes, the driver will play to 30. In fact, we could probably tune it higher, which will probably happen because there's so much assist from the Circumaral, the physics of that cabin effect. So we'll probably tune it up a little higher just because we'll have more bass extension than we need. It'll be
Right.
a matter of actually leaning it out a little bit. So that means that the ribbon will probably tighten up. We already know it's going to be shorter. It's a 3-inch ribbon and not a 4-inch ribbon. So it will have performance characteristics that are different from the SR1. It'll share a lot of them, like the extension, impulse response, the speed of it, the clarity, the very natural timbre of the sound. I find that to be quite remarkable. And maintaining that in a Circumaral design is really a big part of what we're working on with that.
So you mentioned about the other kind of the sound in general compared to the SR1A. Like what I'm thinking about is also the mid range, the upper end extension. Would that be fairly similar to the SR1, or would there be obvious, like, would it sound very, very different?
Well, it's interesting because it will definitely sound different, only because things that we hear in contrast to other things.
Right.
So, in other words, it's kind of like in the soup. If you put too much salt in it, all the soup is too salty.
Right.
And so there is a balancing that's involved by getting more bass. What's going on with that mid and top? Well, the ribbon will play it no problem. In fact, it'll have an easier job because the free air resonance won't be as low. So that has the potential of clearing up, but it's setting the bass just right. We're very close to being done, and it's been fascinating what we've been learning about using different materials for the ear pads.
Right.
We've been experimenting with different perforations and different densities of the foam underneath the pads. It's fascinating because that all goes to affecting balance.
Right.
When you listen to an SR1 and you turn the wings outward,
Yep.
you get a more spacious effect, and things you can almost assemble the hall you're listening to. If you're listening to a classical recording, you can open up the wings and you can hear the hall become a little bit more dominant to the actual, say, orchestra, if that's what you're listening to. And you can take and open them up too far, and you can kind of hear where the hall starts to fall apart, and then you bring them in a little bit, and you can hear the hall kind of assemble itself so that everything is locked in and sounds right and natural. You feel like you're in an acoustic space.
Right.
And you'll also notice that as you bring it in, the closer they get to your ears, the more bass you have. So you could take a pair of, say, SR1s and listen to them and press them to your ears as opposed to having them, say, slightly splayed away from your ears.
Yeah.
And you'll hear what's happening in the bass. You'll hear how that bass is coming up. And if you experiment with that, you'll get kind of an idea of what it's like in a Circumaral environment. Oh, another thing you can do is cup your hands behind the SR1s to kind of seal that gap a little bit.
Right.
So that you're kind of making a partial Circumaral, because it's still leaking out the top and the bottom. But you can hear the effectiveness of introducing cabin effect. And so our thing that we're doing right now is very carefully creating that acoustic space that makes sure that the balance of the entire spectrum is there. As far as everything else, it's all dialed in and working perfectly. It's just that fine tuning of what's going on with the acoustic space.
Right. Okay. So, what's going to be? Do you have any kind of approximate pricing for this new headphone?
Yeah, we are certain. I'll give you our high price. We're
Mm-hmm.
shooting for a little lower. There's just a few materials that we haven't settled on,
Yep.
and we also haven't had a chance to do any meaningful time studies as far as like how long it takes to build them and what the cost of labor and that sort of thing will be. So I'll give you our high estimate. Our
Mm-hmm.
high estimate is $2,900.
Okay. Yeah,
That's our high.
which is if you look at kind of top of the line headphones, I mean that's quite a reasonable price compared to these headphones that are costing $6,000, $12,000. They're very kind
Yeah,
of out there.
yeah. It's really it's not a bad price for a first-rate, quality product.
Hmm.
Where one of the good things is by having our operation in Serbia. Serbia is where everything is built,
Okay.
and then here in California, 100% of production is sent from Serbia to California, and then from California we distribute throughout the world.
Hmm.
And by having the complete production facility in Serbia, um, we get, well, Alex, first of all, Serbia is the land of Tesla, and
Yeah.
Alex is a brilliant man, and he's really good at running his operation, and he's really good at getting brilliant people.
Hmm.
And what's nice about it is here we are, we're the founders of the company, and we have every bit, we're responsible for every bit of production and distribution. And we're not relying, say, on factories in another country that are building for us. We
Right.
actually build for ourselves, and we're building in Serbia. Our people are brilliant. They do very fine work, and the labor rate is so much less than it would be, say, in the United States.
Hmm.
Um, so we're able to give what we might consider a traditionally built in the USA type of product, in the heyday of U.S. manufacturing or German manufacturing. It's top rate in its fabrication, but we do save the customer money by just the sheer economics of Serbia. It's
Right.
less expensive to build it there.
Will the headband design of the Circumaural headphone be similar to the SR1?
It's very similar. We're still using that same spring steel that we use on the SR1.
Hmm.
That material is incredible. It you can contort it into any shape or tension pretty much that you want, within its physical abilities, but it's very flexible in terms of manipulating it to fit into a head. It's extremely light. It's non-corrosive. It just doesn't break. It's just a
Right.
really good, light, stable material. So yeah, the very thin band over the top, and then there's the leather. Although we are working on some non-leather options for people.
Hmm.
Every once in a while, people ask for something that doesn't have any leather in it,
Yeah.
and so we're having that as well. But it'll still be the same mechanical design as far as the spring steel with the leather band, going across it for adjusting height and that sort of thing. but the headphones themselves, there won't be any of the that axle where you can adjust the toe in or toe out, or maybe you call it the camber. So they'll just fit straight down on the ears, and they are an open back design.
And there's going to be some angle to the drivers in the cup. Is that right?
Yes, they are. There is the drivers are actually forward of the ear, uh, similar to like a speaker. You know, they're slightly forward, but internally uh, there's some there's some very interesting chambering going on, and the driver itself. I think we ended up with 15 degrees. So uh, the if you think of it, say where your the front of your ear, that portion there, say it sits there, but it angles outward by 15 degrees, so it doesn't shoot straight into the ear. We're getting a more a spacious
Right.
type of presentation. Uh, it's being a headphone. It's still inside your head, you know,
Right. Right.
but it's less so.
Hmm.
It's more natural the way a speaker is, or like the SR1 is. Not as much as the SR1, but pretty close.
And speaking of kind of a natural sound, that's a good segue to my next question, which is regarding chains that are used and gear and electronics that are used to drive these headphones. So I know that some people actually like using either like tube preamps or tube devices in their chain, and actually find that that kind of tilts it to a warmer tonality, and it sounds more pleasing to the ear to some people. First of all, my
Right.
question is, what are your thoughts on doing that, putting your tubes in your chain? And then also, my understanding is you're also going to be coming out with your own tube headphone amp. So if you could talk about both those things.
Oh yeah. Well, uh, I've been designing tube stuff, or I should say, to be more accurate. When I was a kid, gosh, I think I was 17 when I started. Uh, I was kind of rebuilding stuff, and really getting interested in vacuum tubes. So I was,
Right.
finding old amplifiers and rebuilding them, and kind of learning like that. Starting, well, I started messing with 10, then I became about 17. I started, making gear and actually selling gear and that sort of thing. Um, so and it was always vacuum tubes. So I have
Mm-hmm.
a lot of affection for vacuum tubes, and it's very much kind of that's kind of what I relate to.
Mm-hmm.
I've just been in that technology for so long, and I've enjoyed it very, very much. And I like what vacuum tubes bring to the equation. Um, I do find that depending on their design, and also the appropriateness of the interface between a tube design and, say, a ribbon headphone or any other headphone, there's a few variables that happen in there. So speaking in general, I do like the effect that tubes are able to bring if it happens to be a good pairing. That can be very nice, and they can warm things up. We this new amplifier that we have, um, that I'll be showing at the Can Jam in September. That's in Orange County. I think it's Irvine. that will um, that will be there, and this is a very interesting amplifier design. And again, we're building it in Serbia. The lead designer is a fellow named Dragan Solaya. I've known Dragon for about 15 years, and I think Alex has known him for maybe 30 years or something. Very good friends, and he is the lead engineer on the amplifier. And naturally, Alex and I, we uh, are a part of it by assisting and suggesting things, or even providing solutions in some cases for our needs. Dragon is perfectly capable of designing, anything he wants to design. We just try to, make sure that we're directing things towards reproducing or amplifying for a ribbon headphone. So we kind of make sure everything stays on track in that direction. And this amplifier is very interesting because we call it the VM1A. VM stands for variable mode. And what this does to, the reason I bring this up is to answer your question. With variable mode, the amplifier can be operated in triode mode, in ultralinear mode, or pentode mode. All of these modes have characteristics that are, say, complementary to different things. Triode mode may not be the most slamming, hard-hitting, something you'd listen to, let's say, electronic techno music,
right.
but it would sound wonderful listening to acoustic jazz or classical music, or any kind of acoustic music for sure. Triode mode is really lovely and relaxing. So you can set it there for that. Then there's ultralinear mode, which is very good for harder hitting type of music, or something that requires something more solid. And of course, pentode can be perceived as say more aggressive sounding. And so between those three modes, you're actually able to dial in operating conditions of the amplifier that would be more or less complementary to the headphones playing a certain type of music. So it's very versatile. In other words, personality. The amp has three personalities. You pick which one is most suitable for what you like to hear.
So out of the three modes, which mode do you prefer?
Well, they're like they're all good. It really depends on program material and the headphones themselves. Generally, I listen to things that are more in line with the triode mode. That's kind of more my taste in general. But the triode mode isn't necessarily as solid as you might want for something that's more aggressive.
Right.
It's got a softer bass. It's a beautiful bass. It just might be a little softer if you're playing something with a lot of kick and a lot of bass in it. And by the way, I'm speaking generally. Of course, there's exceptions to everything I've just said. But that would be a general rule of thumb, is you kind of start with that and just turn the knob until you're getting what you want, But generally speaking, I'm kind of a triode guy.
And for this amp, I might have missed it. What tube complement is being used in the amp, and do we have an approximate price for it yet?
Oh yeah, the input tube is a 6SL7, and then there's a driver tube, and it also operates as a phase splitter, and that is a EL34, which is a classic pentode, still in production. It's just a great tube, a wonderful tube. Easy to find, very reliable, rock solid, an enormous history in audio. And for our output drivers, we're using a pair of EL34s also.
Okay.
So let's see. So basically there are 7 tubes. A single 6SL7, which handles left and right input, and then you have two EL34s, one for left driver and one for right driver, and then four output EL34s, two per channel.
I see. And it's
One thing.
the approximate price of it?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, the price, and I think we're pretty fixed on it. We kind of have this nailed down. That'll be $5,500.
5,500. Okay. And this is a single-ended design, is that right?
Yes. Well, it's single-ended in the input stage, but once you hit the phase splitter, now you're into push-pull.
Okay.
Which is, it's like a balanced or differential type design, but it's single-ended on the input, and then once you go through the inverter into the amplifier stage, you've got push-pull.
And can this amplifier be used to drive other headphones or speakers, or is it basically like an integrated amp, or what kind of amp is it?
Well, it's actually it's got much less utility than, say, our HSA 1B.
Right.
The HSA will drive speakers and any headphone except electrostatics.
Right.
This amplifier, being a tube amp, we had to the ribbon headphones require a lot of current to drive them.
Right.
And if we were to use a standard type amplifier design, we would really need basically a pair of 100 to 150 watt tube amps to drive an SR1, which is absolutely, I mean, it sounds great, but it's a pretty big investment, and you're generating a lot of heat.
Right.
It's way too much hardware and electronics and juice and everything else. So what we did to make this design, again, I'll use the word elegant, where we just broke it down to be as simple and natural as we could make it. So we developed some output toroid transformers that have a primary impedance that is designed to accept the anodes of the EL34s. And I don't remember the exact impedance. I think it's 35 to 3,900 ohms, something like that. But on the output, we have on the secondary, normally in a tube amp, you'll see where it has like an 8 ohm, a 4 ohm, and oftentimes a 16 ohm output, for the load on a tube amp. Well, the secondary on these transformers is a 0.4 ohm secondary. And because of the enormous difference between the primary impedance and the secondary output impedance, from two tubes, we're able to get all the current we need to drive the headphones, because the output of the secondary is an exact match for the SR1.
Oh, I see.
So it's a beautiful, elegant, simple design. And the other thing that's nice about it, too, is there's so much current. We're able to drive two headphones at the same time off of this amplifier.
Oh, wow.
So you can drive a pair of SR1s at the same time, or just one if you want, or you can drive a pair of the Circumarls. You can't drive a Circumarl and an SR1. You wouldn't be able to do that because the baffle step compensation would be wrong for one or the other. So you set the baffle compensation for SR or CA, which is the Circumarl, and it'll drive one or two headphones at a time, but it only drives ribbon headphones. It will not drive, like a 32 ohm up to a 300 ohm headphone, which is pretty standard for dynamics and that sort of thing. So it's just for ribbon headphones.
Got
It's
it.
yeah, it's a very high-end, first-class product that has limited application, but it does it really well.
Going back to the Circumaural headphone, do you know offhand what the approximate weight of it is? The SR1 was obviously so comfortable. That was one of the big advantages of it versus other top of the line headphones, which tend to be very very heavy. Is the Circumaural very light like the SR1?
It's going to weigh a little bit more, but we're talking, grams, just
Right.
a little bit more because of the casing around it.
Mm-hmm.
And the even the foam pads, add a little bit of weight.
Right.
Uh, but it will still be in what I would consider the lightweight category. The SR1s are very lightweight. One thing I forgot to mention too earlier with that open design, normally with a Circumaural headphone, I can't listen very long before I'm getting a little sweaty around the ears and
Mm-hmm.
I'm feeling a little fatigued because my eardrums are in a pressurized chamber with I got a 1/4 inch eardrum with a 2-inch driver
Yeah.
beating it up. So fatigue is something and I've done shows and demonstrations where I've had the headphones on for 8 hours. I have never experienced fatigue with an SR1, never. Uh, Circumaurals, you do tend to get more fatigue, and they will be a little bit heavier. So um, they're they will be very very light. I saw a company. I forget what our weight is on an SR1. I think it's gee, I forget, but it's pretty low. This will
Mm-hmm.
just be you know 20 to 50 grams more.
Okay. Okay, that's great. So it's still quite comfortable. Um, so that's great. One thing that just came to me that you mentioned before is the difference in the drivers between the Circumaural and the SR1. You mentioned that the Circumaural is actually a bit shorter. What was the reason
Yeah.
behind that decision to make it a bit of a shorter driver?
Oh, well, because the reason that I'll kind of answer off the SR1 at first. The SR1 has a 4-inch because we needed to have more bass extension because there was no
Ah, I
Circumaural
see.
reinforcement of the bass. Now with this headphone, to keep it smaller and lighter, you can imagine a Circumaural with a 4-inch ribbon on it. That would be a pretty big pad.
Yeah.
And so uh, we don't have to be um, concerned about the bass the way you are with an SR1
Right.
being an open baffle. So because we get the assist from the Circumaural design, the ribbon doesn't have to be as long to get big bass.
Right.
So we can keep it smaller, keep the headphone to a reasonable size, and bass is not a problem because it's a Circumaural.
That makes a lot of sense. So when are you, or like when is availability of the headphone and the amplifier? And are you taking any pre-orders or anything like that?
Well, that's a really good question because I think we will want to do. I think eventually we'll set up for some pre-orders. Right now, we don't have that available, and it's really probably only because we haven't gotten around to it. I mean, I can't think of any reason not to have pre-orders.
Yeah.
Just we're still in other phases. We're getting cases and foam ready. We're still selecting certain materials. So it hasn't really crossed our mind, but I think probably at least by the show, if not a few weeks before the show, we might open up for pre-orders. Um, the the tube amp. And so for shipping, as far as the product goes for shipping, even if we have pre-orders, yeah, I'll be showing some first articles at the show, and so I don't expect to have any production models at the show, but they'll be like I say, their first articles, we're just going to make a bunch more of them, as soon as we make those.
Right.
So I'll be showing first articles at the show. I would imagine we would probably be in full shipping sometime in October, maybe mid to late October. We'll be shipping at that point
I see.
for the headphones, and that might be a similar situation for the amplifier. The amplifier is a little bit different in the sense that we've already ran a bunch of circuit boards and chassis, and we're just building them up right now. So maybe the amplifier will be ready for shipping a little sooner than the headphones. But in either case, it's going to be, at least I'm expecting to be sometime mid to late October.
And for people who just want to buy the headphone alone, and maybe they have their own electronics they want to run with it, will it still come with the converter box, or do you buy the converter box and then you can use like a speaker amp? Is that all the same?
Yeah, you can use a speaker amp with a converter box, or you can use, we have the Yodaheim R,
Right.
which will drive the Marls. And by the way, when we did the Yodaheim R with Shed Audio, we did it anticipating the Circa Marl. That's why there is the SR switch in and out. It's because if you use the SR1 with the open baffle, you put it in that position, and then for Circa Marl, you take it out. So we had been planning the Circa Marl for years, and so that was incorporated into the Yodaheim, and it's also incorporated in the HSA, and it's also in the tube amplifier. So if anybody, say somebody has already an SR1 and they have a Yodaheim or HSA, they'll be able to just get the Circa Marls and their amp. They've already got their amp. They're ready to go.
Right. Okay, that's great. Okay, Danny, so I think those are all my questions. I really appreciate your time and kind of telling us all about this kind of new exciting products that you're coming out with. I really look forward to kind of reading about them and eventually hearing them, and I wish you all the best. Any last kind of comment or thought or anything that we didn't cover that you want to mention?
Oh, wow. Actually, you came up with some great questions. I feel like we covered a lot of ground. It's
Yep.
very, very cool. Oh, hey, thank you. I really enjoyed talking with you. Great questions, and I enjoyed it very much. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Okay, Danny, you take care.
You too as well. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.